Hi, I'm Gareth Green and welcome to this video on voice leading tips. It's the 9th video in a little mini series of videos on the subject of voice leading because it's a topic that perplexes lots of people. They worry about, oh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? What will be a better way of making this work as I go from one chord to the next? Or how does one voice in my texture want to behave moving from one place to another? So I'm just picking up some of these common mistakes that people make or common confusions that people have and just trying to mop them up one by one. So what's this one about? Well, it's a very simple idea about avoiding crossing parts. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, first of all, have a listen to this little piece of music that I've written here. Okay, does it sound bad? Well, it doesn't sound horrible, does it? Does it sound good? Not really. It's certainly not very exciting, is it? And it somehow just feels a bit disjointed. I'm hearing all these chords one after another, but it's not really kind of working as a piece of music. Now, there may be more than one reason why that's the case, but one of the reasons why this isn't working brilliantly and why the harmony isn't working brilliantly, even though the choice of chords is perfectly reasonable, is this rule about crossing parts. Now, let's have a look at what I'm saying about crossing parts. In the first chord, we have this E in the soprano, and in the very next chord, we have a G in the alto part. Now, you can see that this G in the alto part is higher than the previous E in the soprano part. So the soprano's gone E, then the alto's immediately gone above it with G. That is an example of crossing parts. Or here's a crossing part in the opposite direction. I've got C, middle C in the tenor part there, followed by B in the alto part. So that B in the alto part is one below the previous tenor note C. So the parts are crossing, and you can see it's happening all over the place here, isn't it? Like, you know, we've got a B in the soprano part there, but the next note in the alto part is E. It's a fourth higher. It's really crossed over, isn't it? And then you can see the same thing happening again here, where we've got E in the alto part. The next note in the soprano part is G, a six below it. So they've really crossed over big time, haven't they? So some of these crossings are quite close, like this one, middle C in the alto, followed by a D one note higher in the tenor. Some of them are a bit wider, like I've got D in the tenor going to E in the tenor, but I previously had G in the bass, so that's crossed over. And then obviously these things are much bigger. So if you allow these parts to keep crossing over each other like this, then you end up with this slightly disjointed impact. So it's really a question of thinking, okay, if the soprano part is leaping up a six, I need to be a bit careful because it's very easy to do something like write a G in the alto part there. But what it's really saying is because I had E in the soprano, the alto part here should be no higher than E. You can have the same note, E, or a lower note, but you can't have a higher note than that. Because I've got C in the tenor there, well, this needs to be C or higher. You know, it could be a D in that chord, for example. So notice you can flush these things out. Sometimes when you've got big leaps in parts, they generate crossing parts. So you can see this alto is ridiculous. It's going up an octave and a fourth, then it's coming down a tenth. So real roller coaster alto part, which is not good voice leading anyway. You don't want parts jumping up in the sky then falling off a cliff, because they don't work as melodic lines. But also because you've got big leaps, you've got a bigger chance of these crossing parts. So even if this is your soprano part, it's kind of trying to think of ways of avoiding these crossing parts. So, you know, you could have written a G in the alto part there. That would have avoided the crossing part with this tenor thing. And of course, it would have made the leap up to the next note less. But this is probably too far away anyway, and it's creating crossing parts either side of it. So maybe if you'd been able to put a G there or something, and maybe had an E in the tenor part, just rearranging the notes in the middle parts can often solve the problem. Sometimes you might need to change a chord, but often it's just a question of kind of rearranging things in the middle parts and keeping your middle parts especially a bit more stable, so we haven't got all this ducking and diving going all over the place. But certainly when you write 4-part harmony, if you find you've got a big leap in any part, that's a particular area where you just want to check that you haven't got crossing parts with one of the neighbouring parts. Otherwise you get this disjointed impact, which doesn't help the cohesion of your piece of music. So sometimes you get something you think, well, that sort of vaguely works, but I'm not over convinced by it. Well, just by a bit of re-engineering of the parts, taking out some of those big leaps and avoiding the crossing parts, you normally find, actually, that sounds a lot better already. So avoiding crossing parts is voice leading tip number 9. Have a look at the other voice leading tip videos and see if you can pick up on other threads that may be useful to you. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me point you to the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Lots of things on there, very exciting things to have a look at that are giving you lots of resources on your musical journey. And lots of people have got to do oral tests. If they're doing exams, often part of the exam is doing oral tests. Actually, life should be a bit more than doing oral tests for exams, because oral training is absolutely critical to any musician's skills. So on the website, you can find the oral tests for each grade of the ABRSM exam system. So it's a kind of graded course in oral tests from 1 to 8. And even if you're not doing the exams, you probably find it pretty useful to work through those. Just get your ear tuned into what's going on. Can you hear what you're playing before you get to it? Can you hear what you're writing? Can you hear something and imagine how that would be written down? All this kind of stuff, So it starts with very basic things at grade 1, clapping in time, deciding how many beats in a bar, repeating short phrases, that kind of stuff, recognizing certain features of a piece of music. By the time you get up to grade 8, you're singing back, repeating bass lines of pieces of music, recognizing chords, cadences, modulations, doing some sight singing, doing aural analysis. So lots of things there that would generate musical skills. And if you are working for the exams and you need to tackle these oral tests, huge numbers of hints and tips on how to do the tests, how to equip yourself with the skills that are required, lots of exercises to try. So by the time you get to the exam, you're feeling well on top of it. So there we are, oral test, lots of other stuff there as well. www.mmcourses.co.uk.